One second she was just trying to escape a persistent creep at a crowded gala. The next, her lips were pressed against a stranger in a perfectly tailored suit. She thought it was a harmless distraction. She didn't know she had just kissed the city's most ruthless mafia boss. The Luminary Gala at the Whitmore Historic was supposed to be a career-making night for Harper Kane. At 26, she was a junior financial auditor at a mid-tier firm, and landing an invitation to the city's most exclusive charity event was her shot at networking with Chicago's elite. She wore a borrowed emerald silk gown and kept her posture rigid, nursing a single glass of champagne for over an hour. It was supposed to be a night of polite handshakes and business cards. Instead, it turned into a nightmare the moment Bradley walked in. Bradley was a senior partner at a rival firm who had spent the last 3 months refusing to accept that Harper wasn't interested. Tonight, the open bar had emboldened him. For 45 minutes, he shadowed her through the ballroom, his hand repeatedly finding the small of her back, his whiskey-soaked breath hot against her neck. Desperate to lose him, Harper slipped through a set of heavy mahogany doors, leaving the chandeliers and the string quartet behind. She found herself in a dim, private corridor reserved for the hotel's VIPs. Thick carpet swallowed the sound of her heels, but she could still hear Bradley's uneven footsteps pushing through the doors behind her. "Harp, come on," Bradley slurred, his voice echoing down the narrow space. "Stop playing hard to get." Panic flared in her chest. The corridor was a dead end, terminating at a set of guarded double doors. Standing directly in front of them was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, filling out a bespoke charcoal suit. He was half turned away, speaking in a low, authoritative murmur to a massive guard in a trench coat. Bradley's footsteps were getting closer. Harper's mind raced, adrenaline hijacking every ounce of common sense. She needed Bradley gone, permanently. She needed a shield. Without thinking, she lunged forward, grabbed the lapels of the stranger's suit, spun him around, and pressed her lips against his. For a fraction of a second, the man went completely rigid, like a statue carved from ice. Harper squeezed her eyes shut, praying he'd play along. To her shock, he didn't push her away. Instead, a large, calloused hand came up to cradle the back of her neck, fingers threading into her updo. His mouth took control of the kiss, with a devastating, dominant intensity. He tasted of expensive scotch, dark tobacco, and something inherently dangerous. When Harper finally broke away, gasping, the world around her had frozen. Bradley stood 10 feet off. All color drained from his face, and he wasn't looking at Harper. He was staring at the man she was clinging to, jaw slack with pure terror. He stumbled backward, nearly tripped over his own feet, and sprinted back into the ballroom. Harper exhaled in shaky relief. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping back. "I'm so sorry. He wouldn't leave me alone, and I just—" Her words died in her throat. The dim light shifted, illuminating the stranger's face. Brutally handsome. Aristocratic bone structure, eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and entirely without mercy. A faint silvery scar cut across his left jaw. It wasn't just him. 3 other men had materialized from the shadows, everyone with a silenced pistol drawn and aimed at Harper's chest. "Hold," the stranger commanded. His voice was a low, gravel baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Instantly the weapons lowered, though the men stayed tense, eyes locked on her like wolves cornering a deer. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief, dabbing a smudge of coral lipstick from the corner of his mouth, eyes never leaving hers. "Do you make a habit of throwing yourself at strange men in dark hallways?" I made a mistake," Harper stammered, every survival instinct screaming at her to run. "I'm sorry. Have a good night." She didn't wait for an answer. She hiked up the skirt of her gown and bolted, bursting through a side exit into the freezing Chicago night. She didn't stop running until she was locked inside her cramped apartment, telling herself it was just a bizarre run-in with an arrogant billionaire and his overzealous security. She was wrong. The next morning, Harper sat in her kitchen, hands trembling over her laptop. Her best friend Lily had texted an urgent link to an underground news blog. Syndicate boss surfaces at Luminary Gala. Below the headline sat a blurry photograph of the man she'd kissed. His name was Damon Reyes. 32 years old, undisputed head of the Reyes crime syndicate, the docks, the underground casinos, a money laundering network stretching from Chicago to Palermo. The article detailed his ruthless rise, noting he'd personally overseen the violent dismantling of a rival faction just 6 months earlier. He was a ghost, a myth, a man who ordered executions over morning espresso, and Harper had grabbed him by the lapels and kissed him senseless. She slammed the laptop shut, cold sweat breaking across her forehead. She was a nobody, an auditor who bought her coffee at a corner bodega and stressed over student loans. Surely a man like Damon Reyes wouldn't care about a random panicked woman at a party. He'd forget her. But in Damon Reyes's world, nothing was ever forgotten, and everything had a price. For 3 days, Harper existed in a state of suffocating paranoia, flinching at idling cars, her stomach knotting every time the office phone rang. By the 4th day, she began to relax. No one kicked down her door. Bradley had conveniently transferred to his firm's London office overnight, a detail Harper tried very hard not to think about. She convinced herself she'd slip through the cracks. On Friday, a torrential downpour washed over the city. Harper stayed late at the office, burying herself in spreadsheets to avoid the silence of her apartment. By the time she packed up, it was past 10. The building was deserted, the cubicles cast in deep shadow. She rode the elevator down to the underground garage, fluorescent lights buzzing, casting a sickly yellow pallor over the concrete. Her heels sounded too loud. As she approached her beat-up Civic, she froze. Parked diagonally across her exit path was a black Cadillac Escalade, engine purring, windows heavily tinted. Harper's keys bit into her palm. She turned to head back to the elevator, and a massive figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, blocking her path. The same trench-coated guard from the hallway. "Miss Kane," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was a summons. The boss would like a word. The rear door of the Escalade clicked open. Harper's legs felt like lead. Screaming would be useless. The garage was a tomb, and these men were professionals. Trembling, she walked toward the vehicle and looked inside. Damon Reyes sat in the plush leather seat, an open file folder on his lap. Dashboard light cut sharp shadows across his scarred jaw. He looked even more imposing than she remembered. "Get in," he said softly. Harper obeyed. The door shut behind her with a heavy final thud, sealing her into a space that smelled of rich leather and smoky cologne. Harper Kane, Damon read from the file without looking up. Magna cum laude, 6 figures in debt. No criminal record, mother in a care facility in Ohio. You live a remarkably mundane life, Miss Kane. He looked up, slate gray eyes pinning her in place. "What do you want?" "I want you to know I'm sorry about the other night," Harper said, voice cracking. "It was an accident. I didn't know who you were." "Your ignorance is irrelevant," Damon said. "Your actions have created a significant complication." He tossed a glossy photograph onto the seat beside her. Harper looked down and gasped. A high-resolution shot of their kiss in the hallway. Passionate, desperate, entirely consensual from the angle. "That photograph," Damon said, voice deadly calm, "was taken by a man working for Victor Kessler. Kessler runs the Southside faction. He's been looking for a weakness to exploit before he moves on my territory. You, Miss Kane, have just painted a target on your own back. As of yesterday morning, the underground believes you're my mistress." The blood drained from Harper's face. "No, you have to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I'm nobody." Damon let out a hollow laugh. "In my world, perception is reality. Kessler doesn't care who you actually are. He only cares that I let you get close enough to touch me. He'll take you. He'll torture you to get to me, and then leave what's left of you in the river." Nausea rolled through her. The sealed air of the Escalade felt suffocating. "Please," she whispered, tears rising. "How do I fix it? I'll leave town. I'll disappear. Kessler has eyes at every airport and train station in this city. Run. And his men intercept you before you cross state lines." Damon leaned forward, his presence swallowing the small space. "There is exactly one way you survive this." Harper stared at him, paralyzed. "You lean into the lie," Damon said smoothly. "Kessler operates on leverage. He'll try to use you to draw me out. I need a traitor in my ranks exposed, and Kessler is the key to finding him. You'll play the role of my devoted woman. You move into my estate tonight. You attend events on my arm. You smile. You hold my hand. You convince Victor Kessler that you are the most precious thing in my life." "You want me to be bait?" Harper breathed, horrified. "I want you to be convincing," Damon corrected. "Play your part, and my men make sure no harm comes to you. We crush Kessler inside a month. Refuse." He let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. "And I leave you in this garage, and Kessler's men have you before morning." It was a devil's bargain. Give herself over to a ruthless syndicate boss, or die at the hands of a rival cartel. Harper looked at the photograph. The single reckless moment that had set her life on fire. Then she looked at Damon, reading the unwavering calculation behind his eyes. He wasn't asking her. He was giving her a choice in how she'd face her own doom. "Okay," Harper whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I'll do it." Damon's expression didn't soften, but something dangerous sparked behind his eyes. "Good girl." He tapped the glass partition. "Take us home, Enzo." As the Escalade pulled out and merged into the rain-slicked streets, Harper stared out the window. She was no longer a junior auditor. She was the property of the Reyes Syndicate now, stepping into a world soaked in blood with no way back. And as Damon's warm, powerful hand closed over her trembling fingers, a rehearsal for watchful eyes, she realized the most terrifying part wasn't the danger. It was how perfectly her hand fit in his. The gates of the Lakeshore estate loomed like the entrance to a beautiful, terrifying fortress. Harper stared through the tinted glass as heavy iron doors swung open onto a sprawling stone mansion ringed by manicured hedges and armed guards. She was no longer a civilian. She was an asset. A pawn in a deadly game of chess between Damon Reyes and Victor Kessler. For the first 2 weeks, her existence was a masterclass in psychological whiplash. By day, she was sequestered in a lavish guest suite, tended by a silent housekeeper named Marisol and a stylist named Odette. By night, she was paraded through Chicago's underground, private gallery openings, illicit casino nights, exclusive dinners behind unmarked doors. Every public moment was an immaculate performance. Damon would pull her close by the waist, thumb tracing her hip, murmuring dark, meaningless Italian into her ear just to make her shiver, ensuring every onlooker believed they were madly in love. But the moment the car doors closed on the way home, the warmth vanished. He turned back to stone, tracking enemies in silence. "You're fidgeting, Harper," Damon observed one evening in his dim study, pouring a glass of scotch with his back turned. "I'm not a trained operative, Damon," she snapped, frustration finally spilling over. "Kessler's men were photographing us at the restaurant tonight. I can feel them watching me. I feel like I'm suffocating." He turned, gray eyes locking onto hers, and crossed the room slowly, stopping inches away. The scar on his jaw caught the lamplight. "Fear is a liability," he murmured. "Kessler feeds on it. If he smells your terror, he strikes." "How am I supposed to pretend I belong in a world of blood and bullets?" she demanded, looking up at him. Heart hammering. He reached out, callous fingers gently tipping her chin up. "You don't pretend to belong to the world, Harper. You pretend to belong to me. When you're with me, no one touches you. You need to believe that." For a suspended moment, the air between them thickened. His touch wasn't a performance now. They were entirely alone. Harper felt a treacherous flutter in her chest. The dangerous Mafia Don was supposed to terrify her, but all she could focus on was the protective heat radiating off him. Heavy footsteps broke the moment. Enzo burst into the study, face grim. "Boss, we have a problem." Damon dropped his hand, instantly transforming back into the syndicate leader. "What is it?" "It's Harrington. Damon's second in command for the Northside Territory. We intercepted a burner transmission. He's been feeding shipment schedules and security rotations to Kessler. He's the mole." Damon's expression didn't change, but the temperature of the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Where is he right now?" "Running floor security for the underground diamond auction at the Sorrento tonight. Kessler's confirmed to attend." "Perfect," Damon said, a lethal calm settling over him. He turned to Harper. "Tell Odette to put you in the red dress. Tonight we trap a rat." 30 minutes later, Odette pinned Harper's dark hair into an elegant cascade and painted her lips deep crimson. The red dress was a masterpiece of danger. Plunging neckline, a slit that exposed a custom holster strapped to her thigh. Damon had insisted she carry a small pearl-handled derringer. "Just in case," he'd whispered, sliding the cold metal against her skin with a gesture that felt overwhelmingly intimate. The ride to the Sorrento was silent, rain lashing the armored windows. Harper studied the sharp, predatory set of Damon's jaw. He was a man preparing for war. The Sorrento's penthouse was a glittering sea of corruption. Corrupt politicians and cartel bosses mingling beneath crystal chandeliers, waiters weaving through bodyguards stuffed into bespoke tuxedos. The moment they entered, conversations hushed. Damon placed a possessive hand at the small of Harper's back, guiding her through the crowd. "Smile, Harper," he murmured. "Show them you're untouchable." She forced a dazzling smile, leaning into his warmth. Across the room, near an illuminated display of raw diamonds, stood Victor Kessler, older, silver-haired, a cruel reptilian face. Beside him stood Harrington, Damon's trusted lieutenant. Kessler's eyes locked onto Harper with a predatory gleam. He whispered something to Harrington, who paled and nodded rapidly. The trap was set, but Harper realized, with a jolt, they were walking straight into a monster's jaws. Damon didn't hesitate, leading her directly into it, his stride measured and utterly without fear. The crowd parted for him instinctively. "Damon," Kessler purred, spreading his hands in false warmth. "A pleasure, seeing you step out of the shadows. And who is this stunning creature? You've kept her hidden far too long." "Victor," Damon replied, flat and deadened, offering no hand. "This is Harper, my fiancée." Harper's breath caught at the word. A new addition to the script, designed to raise the stakes to a boil. Kessler's gaze slithered over her, making her skin crawl. Charmed. It would be a tragedy if anything happened to such a beautiful investment. "The only tragedy tonight, Victor," Damon said quietly, "will be the sudden drop in your life expectancy if you look at her like that again." The silence that followed was deafening. Harrington shifted, hand inching toward his jacket. Harper felt her pulse hammering. She remembered Damon's lesson in the study. She wasn't just bait anymore. She was part of the game. "Damon," she purred, channeling every ounce of courage she had, trailing a finger down his lapel. "The air in here is stale. Perhaps Harrington could fetch us some fresh champagne." She locked eyes with the traitor, gaze piercing and knowing. Harrington froze, looking desperately toward Kessler. The dynamics of the room snapped violently. The Northside boss knew he'd been made. The air grew razor thin, the opulence choked out in an instant. Harper's demand hung between the men like a lit fuse. Harrington's face drained of color, eyes darting between his current boss and the rival who'd bought his loyalty. Kessler's confident smile faltered. He recognized the shift on the board. Damon didn't just suspect Harrington, he was parading his knowledge in front of the city's criminal elite, daring Kessler to move. "Get the lady a drink, Harrington," Damon said, barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of an executioner's axe. Harrington stepped back, hand trembling over his jacket. "Damon, I swear to God. Save your breath." In a single chaotic heartbeat, the ballroom erupted. Harrington panicked and drew his weapon, not on Damon, knowing he couldn't beat the Dawn's reflexes, but on Harper, wrenching her toward him as a shield. The red silk tore at her shoulder. "Nobody move!" Harrington screamed. Screams echoed off marble as guests dropped to the floor. Crystal shattered. Enzo and Damon's men drew their weapons, but froze. Harrington had his gun pressed to Harper's temple. Damon stood entirely still, his gray eyes blazing with something apocalyptic. It wasn't the look of a boss losing a strategic asset. It was the look of a man watching his world burn. "Let her go, Harrington," Damon said, calm, far more terrifying than a shout. "Release her now, and I only put one bullet in your skull instead of 10. "Kessler promised me the north side," Harrington shouted, backing toward the service elevators, dragging her with him. "You're weak, Damon. You let a woman soften you. You're unfit to rule." Kessler laughed from the safety of the diamond cases. "He's right, Damon. You brought a civilian into a war zone. This is your kingdom crumbling in front of you." Harper's heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird, the gun digging painfully into her temple. But looking at Damon, the terror masked barely behind his rage, she understood the truth. The long nights, the protective touches, the heated glances in the dark. It hadn't been an act. He actually cared for her. And she, God help her, cared for this ruthless, broken man. She wasn't gonna die a helpless victim in a borrowed red dress. She remembered the derringer strapped to her thigh. Harrington's grip on her was awkward, his attention split between Damon's advancing men and the elevator behind him. Harper sucked in a sharp breath and went entirely limp, dropping her full weight toward the floor. The unexpected dead weight caught Harrington off guard. He stumbled, cursing, his grip slipping from her arm to her hair. In that split second, Harper's fingers found the cold grip of the pistol beneath her slit skirt. She didn't hesitate. She aimed up and fired. The crack of the derringer was deafening. The bullet tore through Harrington's shoulder, shattering his collarbone. He shrieked, dropping his weapon and falling backward onto the marble. Before he even hit the floor, Damon was moving, closing the distance like a shadow, weapon drawn. He didn't fire at Harrington. He fired at Victor Kessler. The ballroom dissolved into a bloodbath. Gunfire shattered the chandeliers. plunging the room into strobing dark. Damon grabbed Harper by the waist and pulled her behind a heavy marble pillar as bullets chewed through the plaster above their heads. "Are you hit?" he yelled over the roar of gunfire, hands frantic as they checked her body, smearing Harrington's blood across her red dress. "I'm fine. I'm okay," she gasped, dropping the empty Derringer onto the carpet. Damon pressed his forehead to hers, in the dark, chest heaving. "You reckless, beautiful fool. You could have been killed." "You told me I belonged to you," Harper fired back, grabbing the lapels of his suit, just like the night they'd first met in that hotel corridor. "I wasn't going to let him take me anywhere." A heavy, intimate silence fell, despite the gunfire still echoing on the other side of the pillar. Damon stared down at her, the mask of the syndicate boss completely shattered. He leaned in and kissed her. Not a performance for any audience this time. Desperate, bruising, tasting of gunpowder, adrenaline, and something like devotion. "Enzo," Damon barked, breaking the kiss but keeping Harper shielded. "Clear," Enzo's gruff voice rang out. Damon pulled her up. The penthouse was destroyed. Victor Kessler lay dead near the shattered diamond cases. Harrington bled out on the carpet, begging for mercy. Damon didn't look at him as he fired one final shot. The war was over. Damon holstered his weapon and looked at Harper, his expression softening into something she'd never seen from him. Real vulnerability. "The threat is gone. I'll have Enzo drive you to the airport tonight. There's a new identity waiting. You're free to go back to your life." Harper. Harper looked at the carnage around her, then at the man who had dragged her into hell, only to realize he was the one place in the world where she felt entirely safe. She stepped over the broken glass and wove her fingers through his. "I already told you, Damon," she whispered, wiping a smudge of dirt from his scarred jaw. "I'm not running." Damon Reyes, the most feared mafia boss alive, smiled. He pulled her against his chest, arms closing around her as sirens began to wail in the distance. The civilian auditor was gone. The queen of the syndicate had arrived. Harper's journey, from a terrified accountant to the fearless queen of the Reyes syndicate, proves that sometimes the most reckless mistakes lead straight to our true destiny. Did this one leave your heart racing as much as ours? Smash that like button, drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest, and share it with a fellow mafia romance addict who needs this in their feed. Subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next dangerous, blood-soaked love story.